I'd like to welcome everyone to our electronic regional council meeting on April the 27th, 2022. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, regional council is practicing physical distancing. I am present in the council chambers. All other councillors are participating electronically. I will now ask the clerk to conduct roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Rubanovic.
Present.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Jowett.
Here.
Councillor Herb.
Here.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Kiefer.
Here.
Councillor McGarry.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Here.
Councillor Shantz.
Here.
Councillor Strickland. Councillor Foxton.
Present.
And Councillor Galloway.
Here.
We have regrets from Councillor Rents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, clerk. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today virtually is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. I would now entertain a motion to reconvene in open session. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Shantz. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. We are now in open session. Any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we have no presentations and no petitions. Before hearing delegations, I'm going to ask for Ryan Petitpierre to come forward and provide a quick context for a report, which we will hear after we hear the delegations. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, and through you, good evening, Regional Council. This report has been drafted to outline the growing complexity and challenges in meeting the needs of those experiencing homelessness right across Waterloo region. It has been drafted with full acknowledgement that it is not only an increasing challenge, but that the complexities at the root cause of the issue require a community, cross-sectoral, and all levels of government understanding and response. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the number of people experiencing homelessness in our community for longer periods of time has grown. This is a symptom of the unmet need for affordable and supportive housing, of inadequate social assistance rates, and insufficient mental health and addiction supports. Through our relationship with community partners, we know that the current residents, encampments, and the emergency shelter system has significant and growing health, mental health, and addictions care needs requiring intensive and complex health supports. Supporting and meaningfully addressing these needs requires a shared responsibility of the community, of the region, and of the provincial and federal governments. Without this, many of our residents will not have the access to the supports that they need, and the cost to address them will continue to be shouldered by the regional taxpayer. This report is an attempt at balancing meeting immediate human needs and dignity with longer-term sustainable solutions for the broader homeless population. Balancing the needs of multiple stakeholders, encampment residents, neighbors, businesses, and balancing the needs of managing immediate but sustainable solutions with efforts to address the root causes and implement permanent solutions through a housing first lens. That balance is not easy to strike and remains one of our most pressing social challenges. The report outlines some immediate actions to address the needs of the 100 Victoria Street North residents with 24/7 access to washrooms and hygiene facilities, as well as a commitment to longer-term equitable access for everyone in the region. We know we cannot do this alone, and so this report further calls on other orders of government, including the Ontario Ministry of Health, to meaningfully address the growing phenomenon and complexities of homelessness Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Colleagues, I'm going to now introduce our delegations, and I will entertain questions of clarification of the delegations. And then if we have any staff questions, we will direct them to staff after that when we bring the report forward. There are an additional 3 delegations to the ones on the order paper, and I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation that we present every delegate. Please leave your video and camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you're called upon to speak. Today's delegations are all registered after the deadline and have been allocated 3 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed, and you are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast via live YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and any hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations: please do not take offense if following your presentation, there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas that are shared with us by community members. So our first delegation is Martin Asling, member, co-founder of Waterloo Regional Yes in My Backyard. Welcome, Martin. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Council for having me here today. I would also like to thank the City staff who wrote this report, and particularly for the work that has been done behind the scenes to come up with a means to provide 24/7 washroom access for people experiencing homelessness at a location close to the Victoria Street Encampment. Homelessness is not only an extreme form of material deprivation, but also an extreme form of exclusion. Lack of washroom access is an example of both. Being able to use a washroom is both a very basic comfort, and the lack of this option deprives people of a basic dignity. I can't truly imagine the additional feeling of exclusion that would come from not having these basic needs met without experiencing it myself. What I can draw on to some extent is my experience working with people who are experiencing homelessness as they entered and stayed at an emergency shelter and at a supportive housing program. I can say that both the mistrust of the system and shame are commonly expressed feelings by residents when they did feel comfortable sharing. This is an example of harm reduction. Harm reduction, the opposite of harm reduction is exclusion. And exclusion fundamentally makes people less unsafe. If someone has, and this touches on our concerns with evictions as well. So if someone has an OD and or drug poisoning, and most are poisonings these days, they are much less likely to receive medical attention. They're much less connected to the sports that could have prevented this event and other health emergencies in the first place. In closing, I applaud the regional report for coming around on this important step towards dignity with their recommendation to provide 24/7 access to the St. John's Kitchen washrooms. I urge you to vote in favor of this. I also urge the region to ensure that the promise of eviction of last resort is taken very seriously for encampments.
Martin, you have 1 minute remaining.
And thank you. And I would reiterate calls for a stationary encampment site. One way to engage with advocates on, particularly on the question of it truly being an eviction of last resort, would be to include advocates in the design of the framework for, as explained in the report, for how that happens. The protocol is what I'm referring to. Once again, thank you to Council and Chair and to regional staff for writing this report for this recommendation that I support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, and great timing. Are there any questions of the delegation? Thank you very much, Martin, for coming to
Thank you.
share your thoughts with us. The next delegation is Julie Sawatzky, founder and CEO of 519 Community Collective. Julie, are you with us?
I am, thank you. I'm just starting the video, but it says that the host has not has disabled it. So I'm not able to start. Oh, here, let's just see. There we go. Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Welcome, Julie.
Thank you
You
so
have
much,
3 minutes.
Council and Chair, for allowing me to speak. I really appreciate it. And since I originally made my plea to speak, there's obviously been some updates on your end where you guys are really doing a great job trying to facilitate some kind of a solution to this problem, you know, having washrooms accessible at St. John's, and not just washrooms, but the showers as well, would be something that would be an incredible benefit to the folks living at that encampment and in surrounding encampments as well. So I applaud you for taking the time to really make this a priority, because it is very much a priority for people who are living out on the street. So I'm incredibly interested in speaking with you guys today in the lack of basic needs at the Victoria Street and Weber Street Encampment and surrounding encampments. I run a local organization called the 519 Community Collective, and across social media we have almost 12,500 members, and this is an issue that we all believe in very strongly. In the last 24 hours, I started a petition to see how many people would be interested in seeing there be some kind of a solution to this problem, and almost 300 people in 24 hours have signed the petition and said that they are in big favor of a solution to this porta potty, or, you know, being able to use the restrooms at St. John's Kitchen. Having a solution for right now does not mean you're saying yes to them all living there forever. I think we all understand that encampments are not intended to be forever solutions. I don't think anyone also intends on living their life like that. These folks have really limited options right now. The next closest washroom would be the Ray of Hope, and that's a really far walk for people with menstrual cycles, folks with IBS, bladder infections, urinary tract infections, and worse. This is just an awful way to live, and many of them don't choose this lifestyle. They're forced into it by generational poverty, economic situations,
Julie,
the
you
lack
have
of
1 minute
affordable
remaining.
housing in the region. And I believe we have an obligation as a society and as a community to stand up for our most vulnerable members, and having a safe space to use a restroom is a basic human right. We're going to have to figure out a way to help provide these basic human rights to people, or come up with another solution for them as to where they're supposed to go. Because when you deny people their human rights, you're really denying them their humanity, and they are our peers. They're someone's daughters, sons, wives, mothers, brothers. They're people's family, and they may be misunderstood and grouped into a lump sum of individuals out there at that encampment. But I have personally met every single one of the people living at that encampment. We're currently supporting it several times a week, and they really deserve better. So let's see what we can do to make it a much better situation. And I respect everything you're doing to try and help make that possible.
Thank you, Julie. Just about a photo finish there, so well timed. Thank you very much for coming to voice your support for the people in the encampment. I see no questions, so again, thank you for taking the time to come and share
You're
your
most
thoughts
welcome.
with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
So the next delegation is Aleksandra Petrovic from Kitchener. Aleksandra, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and Council, and wish me luck on my 3 minutes. Social Center continues, and part of why I'm here is our ongoing research on displacement and increase in different types of evictions and homelessness. There will be a report published on displacement study in inner suburbs and the recommendations from municipal governments as well. There will be a 6-month report on eviction prevention program that we run, increase in hidden homelessness, more and more vulnerable populations. It seems things will get worse for some time before they get better. And the staff explicitly wanted me to highlight last weekend's case where they had to support 91-year-old woman who was evicted on Friday and packed in a car, going to an unknown destination, which was absolutely homelessness. So things are going to get a bit worse. And in this context, absolutely agree there is no space for, debating human rights, human right to housing, basic human rights, and we'll all agree. So despite some of the conversations that would be reported in the media and the way I would be reading and hearing comments is that actually we seem to present that there is more discord or disagreement around encampments in the community, where actually there is far greater unity and agreement. Porta Potties versus washrooms, that's really not a debate, right? Basic needs, people need somewhere to go, or, you know, dedicated encampments, or sanctioning encampments where people actually are, so we can reach them and support them. Well, there shouldn't be any encampments. Everybody would agree in an ideal and you know, functioning society. But that being said, I can also say the same, that, you know, I'm not sure that
Aleksandra, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thanks to the security guards is the best solution. We want professionals to be paid, but are those right professionals? I don't know, because I wasn't involved in the conversation. So why we're having this apparent discord is because we have separate, conversations even within the processes set up within the region. Unsheltered working group that we've been participating in is not allowing for participation of everybody who thinks they would contribute, including Social Development Center. So how do we have more coherent conversations, and how do we have more inclusive conversations that would involve people living the experience currently in encampments, not only as, you know, leaders in giving suggestions, but actually hands-on contributing those being implemented. So there is a lot to be improved on the side of the process, how we're coming to assessments and other protocols around encampments. Thank you. 1 second. Also for to finish.
Well done, Aleksandra. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to share your thoughts. Councillor Galloway, you have a question.
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. And thanks, Alex, for coming in. And I look forward to seeing the report that you referred to. And I noted that you mentioned that there would be a variety of recommendations to municipalities in regards to that information. I'm curious whether or not there'll be any recommendations to the senior levels of government who actually are the primarily responsible for housing and for funding the various programs.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. And in almost all instances, we agree, we're in agreement with either regional or city governments when they put forward the recommendations to the higher levels of government. This report particularly deals with local situation and context, in this case, protecting renters and tenants' rights, and is geared towards municipal, regional, city governments.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Aleksandra, I see no other questions, so thank you again for taking the time to come and to share your thoughts with us. The next delegation is Jessica Harrison, owner of the Cake Box. Jessica, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Jessica Harrison, and I'm the owner of the Cake Box here in Kitchener. I would like to thank the Regional Council for allowing me to talk today and to be a part of this very important discussion, and as well for the reports that have been available for the community to read and see the development that is happening. My bakery is a business that's located at 70 Victoria Street North. We are one of the units in the plaza directly beside the encampment. I wanted to join the committee today to express my concern over the encampment and just let everybody know the impact that is having on my business, as well as other local establishments and residences as well. The Cake Box has been at this location for almost 10 years. In that time, there has been at most one disturbance or damage of property. However, with the emergence of the encampment, incidences have raised to be almost a weekly occurrence, with just 2 instances just in the past week alone. We are aware of the security that has been provided by the city. However, they're not there 24/7, as I know you are aware. And during one of these occurrences where I had to call security, it took them almost 20 minutes to arrive. And I do have under my employment 4 young women who at this time don't feel safe coming into work, especially like parking and having to walk into the workplace. If the encampment continues through the summer, it will affect my business. With the summer coming up, we are hoping to expand the business, reopen the cafe, and extend our hours. However, if the encampment continues to stay at this location, this won't be possible. We have free family events planned for the community on Sundays and are considering canceling them due to the encampment. Already on the weekends,
Jessica,
which
you have
used to
1
be our
minute remaining.
busiest time, we have noticed a decrease in foot traffic, which has decreased revenue by almost 15% on the weekends. After almost 2 years of COVID restrictions, as we're aware, we are really looking forward to things reopening, and we're feeling a little discouraged. The encampment is not safe not only for my staff, but customers and residents of the campsite. We worry that it won't be long before there is a serious tragedy that has been seen in the past here in Canada. And we just want to see, wondering like at what point is it too late and at what cost. Again, I thank you for letting me be a part of this, and we hope to see something to be resolved and the encampment disbanded before the summer months. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you so much for coming in and bringing in your perspective. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, thank you very much, Jessica, for coming in to speak. Just wondering about the timing of your shop being open. I understand you're mentioning it's not feeling safe to some of your staff to come in and leave your shops. What are the hours that you're working right now?
So our public hours are Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4. However, my staff work Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to sometimes 8 p.m. in the evenings.
Okay, and just for the purposes of those that aren't sure about the geography, about where your shop is compared to the encampment, how far away are you from encampment?
I would say, so if everybody knows Victoria Street, so there is Weber and we are Duke. We're right on the edge of Duke. So we're just on the end there. I'm sorry, I'm not great with feet and meters, so I can't give you a specific distance. But if you can imagine the street there, that's about the distance that we are.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I see no further questions, Jessica, but again, thank you very much for coming in to share your perspective. The next delegation is Jade Billo, owner of Big Bliss. Jade, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for the Regional Council for hearing me today, and thank you to everyone who spoke before me. I do echo the sentiments of everybody saying that the people within this encampment do deserve dignity, and they do deserve to be housed, and they do deserve respect. But I am also a business owner that is actually kitty corner from the cake box from Jessica, who just spoke. And I'll just read what I had prepared. Last Thursday, a man broke into our studio at 2 a.m. in the morning. He broke both the doorknob to our vestibule and also the one in our inner door. Once inside, he took the entire contents of our cash box, as well as a few items around our front desk. This was the second time our studio has been broken into and the contents of the cash box have been taken. The first time was in the first few months of our lockdown. 2 weeks prior to this, while working in the studio, our manager witnessed a man throw a rock through our glass door, shattering it. The man didn't run away. He didn't seem to notice that we had that we were taking pictures, and he just stood there. We have to pay out of pocket to replace it. It's not covered by insurance. This is actually the second time somebody's thrown a rock through our glass. They've thrown also rocks through the glass of the Love Shop in the same building. The first time was during the third time that we were locked down as a business. In total, in the last 2 years, we've been locked down for 11 months. So we are not in a great place as a business to be paying for all of these expenses. Luckily, no one was in the studio when the rocks have been thrown through the windows, because the flying glass and the rocks could have hurt one of my students. A short time before that, a man sat down in a raised platform in our parking lot, and he put his head between his legs. I thought he might be overdosing, so I checked on him to see if he was okay. He said he was, but he sat in the same spot with his head down for about 6 more hours while I was working in and out of the studio that day. When the evening approached, I know my clients were going to come and fill up the parking lot, I was worried that they would hit him because he was hard to see. So I gave him some water, and I told him, and I asked him to leave the space, which he did. After the break-in, I went around to all the local businesses in the area, and almost all of us, the place across the street, Pino's, the cake box from Jessica that just spoke, we've all had stuff to our property. So I've only got 20 seconds left. My point here is I don't think we can wait till fall for the encampment to go. I think we need to address it immediately, because if we wait for the summer, it's going to get much busier and the crimes are going to keep increasing. I've had 2 crimes on my business in the last 2 weeks, and I'm afraid it's going to grow.
Jade, thank you very much for coming and sharing your story with us, and thank you for being so respectful of the time. It sounded like you were speeding up, so I hope you got to the end point where you were hoping to. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you very much, Jade. And I also noted that, so you got a lot out in your time. I'm just wondering, just really so people watching can sort of understand the cost to any individual business. You've mentioned 2 crimes recently, and also the rock that has been thrown through your window. What does it cost to replace the glass in your building? And what else have you had? Like, I guess what I'm looking for is kind of the overall costs that you've been running into, either from theft or vandalism. So one of the windows is probably about $600 to replace. The door's going to be a little bit more than that, closer to $800. The doors that we have to replace, we can't just replace them with like a normal doorknob. It has to be like a high security doorknob. So and then we pay for a locksmith. So that's, I would say, around $400 to $500 as well. And that's 2 doorknobs that were broken. And so it's not just me. I did speak with a man named Hadi. He owns the furniture store across the street from the encampment. Not only has he been broken into 4 times, the garage door that he has. So I don't know the number value, but for my building alone with the love shop and the landlord and myself, it's easily $5,000 easily.
Thank you. Councillor McGarry, any further questions?
No, thank you for giving us kind of an indication of what you're facing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jade, I see no further questions, but thank you very much for coming in and providing us with your perspective.
Thank you for having me.
So colleagues, I'm going to ask that we bring forward the report dated April 27th, 2022, supporting those experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And again, Ryan Petitpierre, our Director of Housing, is on hand if there are any questions. And I'm going to start with Councillor Clark. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I want to thank staff for the report, and I would like to move it if that hasn't already been arranged. I do want to make a comment, though. I think that the media has been really unfair in terms of how they've portrayed this situation, and I do appreciate the comments from the delegations today, recognizing the work that staff have done. But one thing that I do want to clarify, because I've been involved in this from the beginning, so I do know staff have been working on this issue diligently since the encampment first sort of came into being. This is not something that they were forced to examine. This is an issue and a solution that they've been working at very, very hard. And I think that the delegations that we heard tonight just illustrate how complicated this is and how many needs staff need to balance. So I think they've done an excellent job. I think that the solution benefits not just the people who are staying at the encampment, but all of the unsheltered people in the downtown area. And we know that there are many of them that aren't associated with 100 Vic. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Clark. Do I have somebody to second this report, the acceptance? Okay, seconded by Councillor Vrvanovich, and I have you up next as speaker, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Redmond, and really want to first of all thank staff for all of the work that's been done on this, and for the delegations tonight and others who have expressed a variety of concerns on the issue. I do have a couple questions for staff, and some of them are really just for the benefit of the viewing audience, so that there is some clarity. And Ryan, I'm wondering if you can just sort of remind all of us, we're not in the business of, we're in the business of being the shelter services manager. We're not in the business of being the shelter services provider. So whenever we're dealing with these kinds of issues, including the encampments, and this one's a bit unique because it is on regional property, we rely on our ability to work with partners to come forward and step up with us in order to being able to bring solutions forward. Is that correct? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. We operate through a provincial designation that names us as a service system manager for housing and homelessness. What that designation means as it comes to homelessness is around system administration, planning, analysis, and funding. So particularly when it comes to the homelessness side of this equation, our predominant role is a funder. So when we are looking for implementation of solutions, we need a partner provider, a partner agency, somebody to deliver those services through funding that we would contract with them.
And so just, building on, I guess, Councillor Clark's question, and just for clarity in the matter of the public record, the fact that we've been dealing with these issues and talking about, bathroom facilities and so on, this is something that's been discussed, and I mean, you've been in some of the same meetings I've been in since the very beginning, correct?
Correct, Councillor, and through you, Madam Chair. This is the washroom access question has been one that, as upper and lower tier municipalities, at a number of tables, we've been wrestling with and trying to address for a number of years. I think it's been heightened specifically through the pandemic, as well as a number of other social inequities that has brought to light across our community. So it remains a challenge, correct?
Sure, but and really what we needed to do is get to this point where there was a partner that was able to work with us on this issue, and that's why we have the recommendation that's before us, correct?
Correct. We've been looking at trying to find a solution for this particular encampment for a while now. This is a solution that with a partner being able to provide the service that meets the needs at this particular location. We can provide the funding, and we seem to have a solution that will address this particular need.
That's awesome to hear, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't give us, while I know you and your team have done a lot of work behind the scenes on this, I know Councillor Erb has helped out in that regard, and so I want to give him a shout out as well as the folks from the working center. But as we grapple with these issues going forward, and are there any models that you know of in Canada where municipalities aren't just the manager, but in fact have gone a step further and in some instances actually become the provider? And if so, is that something that we should be looking at in some instances going forward? I know that brings a whole new other level of complexity, but have we come to a point where we should be looking at that, or are we best to stay focused on partnering and supporting our not-for-profit providers?
So I'm going to intervene here, Councillor Vrbanovich, and just say I think that is a very relevant question. I doubt that that's something that Mr. Petitpierre can answer on his own, so maybe that's something we can ask staff to come back to, and it's something that we can maybe address at a future meeting, because I would tell you that while it is operational, there's a huge political overlay. So if we can, I don't know, Ryan, if you want to answer that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I agree that it's a much bigger question and that requires some internal conversation and some consultation, probably with our partners before we answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to leave it. I just think it is a question that maybe we need to at some point look at and consider. So I'll just leave it at that part at that and go from there. And the
Barry?
Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have. Yes.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm happy to come back to you, but we have other colleagues waiting. So put your hand up, and I'm happy to circle back if you have further questions.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor
Thanks, Madam Chair. And like Councillor Clark and Councillor Ravanovic, I want to acknowledge all the work that staff have done trying to manage this encampment at Weber and Victoria since it's been there for about the last month. And it feels like an ever increasing challenge serving the unhoused residents of our region who are either part of the shelter system or living in encampments. And I think for staff, I'm sure it feels that most days they are in a constant crisis mode, just trying to keep the lid on a boiling kettle rather than being able to proactively working at creating a stable housing system that will significantly reduce the need for shelters and encampments. And so rather than doing the proactive work that they should be doing, they're just working in this crisis mode. And I think the biggest shout out for tonight is to the Working Center, who have consistently served some of the most vulnerable residents in our community. And just like the regional staff, the Working Center, they've been overwhelmed as well with their work, with their staff and their facilities. And just as an example, they serve approximately 1,100 people a year. 250 people are inside their facility each day using the washrooms, the showers, you name it. And they serve another 200 and some people out the back door with meals on a daily basis. And like they have done hundreds of times in their history, again, they've stepped up to the plate to now provide washrooms 24/7 for those that are living unsheltered, and especially those in the encampment. And so a very big thank you to the Working Center for continuing to go beyond and serving this community, which were limited options for us to look at. And the availability of washrooms 24/7 is a significant recommendation in this report from staff. And hopefully it'll address the concerns of those living in the encampment and the public who have been advocating on their behalf. However, let's not lose sight of recommendations C, D, E, and F, where our continued and persistent advocacy to both the provincial and federal government needs to be unrelenting to provide resources for sustained health funding for mental health and addictions, and capital funding dollars to build more affordable and supportive housing. And this isn't in Waterloo region. It's certainly across the province and in other jurisdictions in Canada. And in many circumstances, I think it's becoming unmanageable. And we need an infusion of money to address the housing and health crisis. And so let's remember to ask the tough questions of all the provincial candidates in the upcoming provincial election to hear what their party's position is on addressing this crisis, because we can't do it alone. We can't do it on the tax base in the region. We need the upper levels of government to step up to the plate to make this happen. And it's so evident that people are living unhoused all across the region, but no place is it more evident in the cores or our three urban municipalities, and where it impacts those who are living here because they're so publicly exposed. But it also impacts the businesses and residents living in proximity. And we heard that tonight. And we have to be sensitive to that and understand what the implications are of these sites growing and growing and growing in size, and what the risk assessment is that we need to put in place to make sure that the people living there are safe, but also the people in the neighborhoods are safe to carry on theirs. And safe and affordable supportive housing, as we all know, it is a human right. And those of us, I think, who have been given the privilege to be elected councillors have an obligation to continue advocating and advocating for those in our community who don't have a voice. And not only is their voice not heard, in some respects, they also become marginalized by some who don't understand the circumstances of why people would live in an encampment or in a tent. And so along with our staff, as councillors, we have a responsibility to be their voice and make sure that it's heard loud and clear to the people who can make this change for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Galloway.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to ask a question first, and then I'll have a couple of comments. The question I had was, someone in the community contacted me who has some familiarity with the system, and I thought maybe they had a suggestion that was at least worthy of some consideration. Given the amount of money that it's going to take to provide the security for the washrooms 24/7, there was a suggestion that rather than use just barber columns or some contract security people, that are to be considered down the road.
So, Councillor Galloway, I'm going to acknowledge Mr. Lochner, and then if Ryan wants to weigh in, I'll go to him. Bruce?
Yes, thank you through you, Madam Chair. It's a great question, Councillor Galloway. And actually, despite, I think, some confusion, that was the intent that the team had when they came up with the concept of a quasi-outreach team that had mental health, outreach workers, paramedics, and perhaps some form of, not security, but doing the types of things that you're talking about. And we realized that there was need for more conversation. So that conversation will continue with the team, with community providers. And our hope is that we come to some kind of innovative solution, as you suggest. So that's the longer answer. The short answer is yes, it's a great idea. And we will continue to work with our providers to bring something back to council on that.
Ryan?
Well, I'm not sure that's exactly what I was referring to, though, Mr. Lochner. I was thinking purely in the context of the use of the washrooms at the St. John's kitchen, the security that's required, the money that we're going to spend, and whether or not those people could have some additional skills. And, that money would be leveraged, not system-wide as the other project suggests, but on a site-specific basis. I don't really need an answer to that. I just wondered if staff could put that on the radar and give it some consideration. The other thing I wanted to say, Madam Chair, is really Councillor Clark and Councillor Erb have really said everything I wanted to say, so I'm not going to repeat everything they said. I agree entirely with the fact that this has kind of been a very complicated matter, and staff and service providers have done an excellent job, and I want to pay particular credit to Councillor Clark and Councillor Erb for the time that they put in. I don't think they had a lot of time to themselves this past weekend, and I want to thank them particularly. And I do want to emphasize, however, that this recommendation tonight has certainly, I suppose, as the centerpiece, the solution to the washroom problem. But I'm very happy and glad that other recommendations are there as well, that shines a spotlight on other levels of government. We are just the service manager, And we work within a pretty prescriptive environment. Funding is essential coming from the other levels of government. And I'm glad to see that there are some recommendations here. There are advocacy recommendations, of course, that really put the provincial and federal governments on notice that we need more support. Others have said and said it well that this problem is growing. It's not getting any better. Things are getting more. Some of the residents are they're more complex in many cases, needing more wraparound services, and we need the support in order to be able to provide those necessary supports to this particular part of our community.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Of course, I want to thank staff for not only the report tonight, but the ongoing work behind the scenes that I know they definitely don't get enough credit for, as this is a very complex issue, and I want to thank them and especially recognize for them for their efforts. I will be supporting the recommendation that's being put forward. In fact, my sister called me earlier several times to ensure that I'd be online tonight to vote for this this measure, as it is very much needed here to deal with a very pressing issue. I would be remiss if I did not ask, and I thank those delegated tonight. I'm sympathetic, to the issues that you're also facing, knowing that businesses locally in the area and including homeowners have faced, significant challenges over the last few years, especially those small businesses that were forced to close during COVID, who are obviously reopened now, wanting to continue to serve the public. And that's simply what they want to do. And we now are obviously experiencing some issues with this particular site. And so my question, and I guess it would be over to Ryan, for those that are watching tonight, staff have outlined an approach that I believe council endorsed recently, and that's through a risk assessment, knowing that, through the encampments around the region, and I think a lot of folks wouldn't know that there are dozens throughout the region, with some well over 100 people that are living in these encampments. This risk assessment that's being done, is there any preliminary, findings with the one that's on our land? I know there's two, but this particular one, is there a risk assessment that's been completed for this? I mean, there's obviously low risk, medium risk, or high risk. Any comment that staff want to make with regard to that, or is it something that they'll wait for a further report to be completed in its fulsome nature?
Ryan?
Thanks for the Councillor, and through you, Chair. Yes, you're correct. So our staff are operating on two pieces of support here. One is the policy that you mentioned that was endorsed by Council back in December. And that's an important piece to remember and consider in all this. That really signaled the official support for our current approach, which is based on a service-first approach, connection to the people and resources and services that they may need, with a respect for their own individual dignity as well, with a last resort of enforcement or clearing the encampment. And that is now our official approach to dealing with encampments. And I think that's important to note and to recognize. Subsequent to that policy being endorsed, we've been working quite hard with our community to come up with a risk assessment that we can all come to terms with and use consistently across the region, not just for this encampment that we're talking about specifically, but knowing that it is a much broader issue. And it's that risk assessment that will dictate when we may have to make a really difficult decision about moving towards eviction. The risk assessment itself is still being worked through that community process, but it's being founded on a few key elements that are baked into the report tonight. Things like the impact on the surrounding neighborhood, the number of people occupying a certain space, existing biohazards and other safety threats as well. Although the assessment isn't necessarily finalized at this point, it's been looked at, and we're probably approaching the medium risk. So again, in my opening comments, we really spoke about balance. When that gets to a high risk, that tips the balance and will force potentially having to take some action in regards to moving people on from that site. So those are all the actions that we're taking. We're trying very hard not to get to that point, but we do think that we do need to measure and balance that from a number of different perspectives. So that's how we'll do it. And if and when we get to that point, there'll be further information that comes back to council before action.
Well, thanks, Ryan, for that answer. And I know that many of the folks that presented tonight in terms of the delegations, and many of the individuals that have reached out to me asking, those very questions, hopefully that there's a bit more clarity there in terms of the tools that our region, knowing that, again, there's a much better process in place that is available for staff to go through as we work towards those different risks, knowing that those local community members want to know the action that the region will be taking, before it gets too late. And so, I can't stress, obviously, that enough. I will ask as well, because it has been circulated in the news media with regards to the construction of the transit terminal. And, the fact that we will likely very much need that location for construction. And we all know during construction, people are likely unable to cohabitate on a construction site. I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak to that particular aspect, be it that it was circulated in the news and provides maybe a bit of a lot more questions, or if we can just leave it for that risk assessment to be done. I don't know if Bruce, one of your team members, wants to address that specific area, or I just think it's an important aspect of it, because I do know people want to know when when we're going to be dealing with this. Knowing that it's, again, a very, difficult situation, and we have to do it in the most cautious, safe, and respectful manner.
So, Councillor Harris, I don't know if Thomas Schmidt's on the call. Or Craig Dyer, or both. Who would like to take to address the topic of use of that site for the Metrolinx partnership to the King Victoria Transit Hub?
Perhaps, Madam Chair, I can just say that we'll be coordinating construction to align with the work that Metrolinx is doing. That schedule is somewhat uncertain at this point, but we can certainly report back along with the work of Mr. Petitpierre with an update on that as the details become clearer.
Thank you. I saw Rod appear and disappear. Is it just as well we take it away? We'll come back with more information. Councillor Harris? Okay, Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, Madam. Through you, a lot of my questions and concerns have been described by my colleagues to date, but I think it's probably evident to those watching at home and the delegations tonight that this is not an easy issue. And too many people try to simplify it. Why don't you just put porta potties on the site? Why don't you just open up washrooms? And you're hearing tonight that there's issues around security. There's issues around porta potties. It was something that the city of Cambridge tried at the beginning of the pandemic when the usual washroom facilities and public washroom facilities were shut down, and we had to remove them because of all the issues that happened. And it's hard to even describe to people if they're not just aware of how difficult that can be. There's all kinds of safety issues and people often using inside these places. And anyway, it does have far more complexity than meets the eye. And I think it's also incumbent upon us to really outline the enormous costs, not only financially to those agencies that are opening it up or to the regional taxpayer in order to try and find a good solution, because it involves security, it involves staff, and you have to ensure the safety of all, not just those that are vulnerable and unsheltered, but also the surrounding businesses, residences, and the staff that are there to care for them. And I think I follow along with Councillor Erb's statements that this is a growing problem. There are more and more people experiencing mental health issues. The pandemic has certainly been part of that. The price of housing has been part of that, and the lack of supported units. And this is indeed something that we need to hammer on the provincial and federal governments about. And since housing is and supports are the provincial government's responsibilities, this is something that should be front and center during this upcoming provincial election, and all candidates need to be questioned about it. We are tied with our hands behind our back in a lot of these issues, and yet these residents are here on our streets. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions and again sort of talk to the complexities and the security issues of porta potties on some of these encampments, and just ask staff again, is that just a band-aid solution, or has it been shown that the more facilities you put in an encampment that's sprung up, does it then attract more individuals to that site? Is it harder then to try and move them to more appropriate housing or a more appropriate site? Just wondering if somebody could answer that.
Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. It's one of the things that we've been considering as it comes to porta potties on the site. We're not wanting to have any unintended consequence of doing that. One of the considerations being, will that attract more people to the site, which increases the risk, which would force us to enact an eviction overall. So that has been a consideration as we weigh what can we do to address this immediate need. The solution that we landed on in the report in front of you seems to be the best that we were able to do in this particular instance, that will try to manage and continue to strive for that balance with all stakeholders. So that was part of our deliberations and part of our considerations when we were looking at all of the options available to address this site. Yes.
And if I could follow up, Madam Chair, I just wanted to talk about surrounding security, not just for the businesses. We heard from specific delegations this evening, but it's certainly an issue not just in Kitchener and across the region, but really across the province. We're seeing these issues. So is there any possibility of providing more security, and in particular the overnight hours, for the area residents and the businesses to try and cut down on some of the challenges that we're seeing, in particular break-ins and fear of the employees and the clients going to these businesses?
So are you basically, Councillor McGarry, saying that security would be 24/7, 7 days a week? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just asking about that. Is that possible, or what kind of a security costs are we even looking at right now with the challenges that we're seeing from the Victoria and Weber site?
So again, Ryan, I know this has been a topic that's been discussed at our meetings.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, the report does speak to the costs associated with providing 2 security guards for about 12 hours at the working center site. So that gives you an idea if we were to increase this elsewhere in adding more guards or across the region, that cost grows exponentially pretty quickly. So the best way I can base my answer is the report does speak to what it costs for 2 guards for about 12 hours. Depending on where else guards would be implemented, For how long and how many, the math grows from there is the best I can provide an answer.
Thank you. And just to complete my comments, Madam Chair, it is a consideration. We certainly were able to do that in the city of Cambridge for a while. We had hired more security guards when there was a window breaking spree. There were some businesses downtown Cambridge that had their windows broken at least 3 times during that time. So we provided extra support. But I think, Mr. Petitpierre, it's true that it costs an enormous amount. And although, you know, we're certainly willing to do that, safety and security of all of our residents is incredibly important. It has enormous impacts on our budgets and on our municipalities and our ability to provide other services when we're having to pull money into those security guards. So again, I can't emphasize enough to anybody listening tonight and to all of us to keep advocating for those dollars. It should be a main platform plank in all of our provincial parties moving ahead to provide far more supports in order to house individuals with low barrier type of housing. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond. And just one last question, then a comment. And just building on the questions that Councillor McGarry had raised and the concerns from a couple of the delegations tonight. And I mean, this isn't unique to this site. You know, as I know staff are aware, I mean, we've had issues and concerns down in Cambridge, we've had them in Waterloo, and we've had them in Kitchener around various sites where we've had shelter in existence. And, you know, I think it's fair to say that the community generally is trying to be compassionate and supportive and understanding, but you know, understandably are concerned from a safety point of view and impact on their businesses and on the safety and security of their homes. And so part of, I guess my question to staff is, you know, our model typically in terms of our relationship with the service providers does not sort of get into the issue of, you know, for lack of a better word, a good neighbor policy and the things that we should be encouraging those service providers to do, and potentially that we should be funding as part of our relationship, because I also don't think it's something that we can just put on them and say, hey, you know, you got to deal with this within the financial package that we're dealing with. Have we looked at something like that in the past? And if not, is it something we can look at in the future? Because I do think it is something that we have a certain degree of responsibility towards. Ryan?
Sorry. Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, in answer to your question, Councillor, yes, and especially we've been developing and implementing those types of policies and contracts as we've renewed them and established them through the pandemic. I'm thinking most recently with the House of Friendship and them having to move some of those locations. We've been more diligent, especially recently, about really engaging our providers in doing that type of a service and engaging with the neighbors. You're correct that historically that was not necessarily the case, but with the expansion of the system, with constant movement of these sites over the last few years, it's something that we've come to appreciate more right into our contracts and try to fund as well to ensure that it happens. Not every provider has this as an obligation with the region, but it's something that we're trying to roll forward, seeing the importance of it and the value that it can have in neighborhoods.
Okay, I'm certainly encouraged to hear that, and I think it is an important piece that we need to pursue going forward. Madam Chair, just in terms of the motion, I obviously, in seconding it, will be supporting it. This is a very difficult and complex issue, as many people have said. I think it's an issue that requires, quite frankly, a great deal of compassion versus criminalization for a whole variety of reasons. Many of these individuals have these fellow citizens, as has been pointed out, are brothers, sisters, sons, daughters of people in our community, and are dealing with complexities in their lives that the vast majority of us are fortunate enough to not have to deal with. But it's incumbent on us, as part of being a caring community, to try to come up with supports, because fundamentally this isn't about the individual. This is about a societal failure in certain issues, such as mental health, such as addictions, and so on, and the fact that we need to do more in order to deal with them. It's not something that we can do on our own. I think, you, Madam Chair, have often said, and others have said as well, it's going to take a whole of community, all orders of government working together, the private sector, the not-for-profit sector, everyday citizens. It's really going to require multi-sectoral collaboration. I also think there's places that we can turn to. I just recently learned of the Institute for Global Homelessness, which is based in Chicago. They've been doing a great deal of work on this issue and looking at it, because this isn't a problem unique to Waterloo region. It's not unique to Ontario or Canada. In fact, it exists around the world to varying degrees, and we have our share of it, and we need to come up with the best possible Waterloo region approach to solving it. And if there's other ideas from other jurisdictions that we can bring in to help us do that, I've always said I'm open to stealing other municipalities' ideas, and they can steal ours. So with that, I hope that council will support this, and I would ask for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vrbanovich. I think we're in violent agreement on two things, that this is a very complex issue, and we all support the staff recommendation. I'll allow Councillor Erb last word, and then we'll have a recorded vote. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it just might be helpful for clarification for people that are listening, and perhaps some of our language hasn't been as clear. The security will be from 6 o'clock in the evening until 8 o'clock the next morning, simply to take the pressure off the working center staff who are there already 13 hours a day. And so the security is from that 6 at night till 8 in the morning when the staff comes. And I just remind my council colleagues that some time ago I think this is what Mr. Lochner was referring to. We were dealing with a rapid response initiative that came from the steering committee, and staff have been continuing some conversation with community partners, and that, with the growing number of encampments and homelessness and mental health and addiction issues, that rapid response initiative may be something that we can use to alleviate some of the problems we're talking about right now, because there's 16 sites in encampment sites in Kitchener, 5 in Cambridge, 3 in Waterloo, numerous ones in the township, and the numbers are not going down, and with summer getting warmer, they're going to increase, and so we need to look at these resources that we could use to mitigate some of the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I too would like to commend staff and my council colleagues and in particular our partners. And while it's the Working Center, St. John's Kitchen has stepped up, I would like to highlight Sanguine, the Integrated Health Center Alliance. There's been a lot of people that have tried to noodle on this, and especially outreach workers who have been going in tirelessly to make sure that those relationships that they have with the inhabitants of the encampment are getting the services that they need. So I would like to remind colleagues, this motion has been moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Vrbanovich, and it's directing staff to do The actions that are A through F, most of them have been referred to, but I just want clarity on what we are voting on. So this is supporting a staff recommendation report as written, and I will look to the clerk to do a recorded vote.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Redmond,
In favor.
Councillor Ivanovic,
In favor.
Councillor Jaworski,
In favor.
Councillor Clark,
In favor?
Councillor Jowett,
In favor?
Councillor Erb,
Favor.
Councillor Nowak,
In favor.
Councillor Kiefer,
In favor.
Councillor McGarry,
In favor?
Councillor Armstrong,
In favor.
Councillor Harris,
In favor.
got it. Councillor Shantz,
In favor?
Councillor Strickland, Councillor Foxton,
In favor.
and Councillor Galloway.
In favor?
Thank you.
So colleagues, that is carried unanimously, and I have to say, Councillor Harris, my heart skipped a beat when I didn't hear you're in favor. I thought I'd have to write a note for you for your sister to say that you were in favor.
Well, you didn't hear, thankfully, the other part when I was on mute, knowing that I was on mute. It probably would have been beeped out, but we're good now.
Thank you. This is definitely a family show. Colleagues, we're going to return to item 8, minutes of the previous meetings. And I would look for a mover and a seconder, and this is for items 8.1 through 8.10, moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. Next, we have communications. You have received them electronically. I don't know if there's anyone wants to highlight. Moving forward, item 10 is a motion to go into the committee of the whole to consider reports. I need a mover and a seconder, and that is to consider committee reports, moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. Colleagues, we're now going to be looking at for a motion on finance reports. This is 11.11 through to 11.113. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Clark. Please use your icons to vote. Oh, Councillor Shantz, do you have a comment or a question?
I do, thank you, and I am happy to move them. Just on the Church Street East, thank you for getting at that. I know we've had numerous discussions on a safe crossing for Church Street, and I think most of those discussions have centered further east than Duke, but I just want to, I guess, remind staff that we do need a safe crossing for kids, for students that are using the park on the north side of Church Street. So please, whether that's in this section or the next project, please don't forget about that.
So you're giving an FYI and flagging this for staff for the future, right, Councillor Shantz?
Yes, please, to continue, because we haven't come to a resolution on it. I would like to ensure that we do.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt, do you want to comment on that?
Just that, through Madam Chair, staff already informed me that that was the answer to the question that you were going to ask, that we would be taking that forward and still be considering that. So I have an email already on that.
Thank you so much.
So colleagues, some of you have voted, some of you have not. So it has been moved and seconded. If we could vote on those reports. That is carried. The next item is committee reports, and it's to approve a summary of the ad hoc committee benefits procurement. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Foxton. This is having to do with the ad hoc committee benefits procurement pilot project. Councillor Harris, you moved it. Do you want to speak to it? And then I'll go to Councillor Galloway.
Yeah, sure. Just briefly, I know that our colleague, Councillor Strickland, isn't able to join us tonight. Now, I would be probably scolded previously for making remarks on a colleague being absent, but he could not be here tonight. Agreed to move this motion as co-chair or vice chair of the steering committee on community benefits. Obviously, initially, I had some significant concerns on the impact to procurement, the ability for us as a region to continue to receive, the most amount of bids on projects that would, ensure fairness for local contractors while respecting taxpayers' dollars and have to foot the bill for these things, ensuring that much needed infrastructure like social housing and others are continuing to be built, as many as we can. However, we know that there are underutilized and underrepresented communities that are currently working throughout our region, especially in construction. There is a significant demand and need for workers on every type of project, whether it be civil, IC&I, or even at local residential sites. And so I really think that this is this will be a great pilot for our region and for other communities to look at. I think the added benefit to this particular program is the region and its taxpayers, supported by its taxpayers, are actually putting its money where its mouth is to provide a cash allowance on 2 much needed affordable housing projects that will actually support contractors who take initiatives to hire, to train, and to hopefully retain those workers locally here, on their rosters. And so I just want to thank staff again for looking outside perhaps the traditional ways of just adding this in terms of a scope to a contractor's RFP, that we're actually putting financial aid forward to be able to be accessed by contractors that will truly do what I think, and I hope it will, is to bring new workers from all different communities, especially those underrepresented, into the workforce long term. And so I'm happy to move it as vice chair of the steering committee. And again, I know that the chair, Councillor Strickland, would have loved to have been here to speak to it even further. But I think coming from perhaps 2 polar opposite sides of this, we can say that we've got something good. But it is a pilot, and we're going to evaluate these 2 projects and hope for some good findings after they're complete. So thanks, Chair, for the time, and I'll watch and listen to my colleagues' feedback on this proposal.
So it's been moved by Councillor Harris and seconded by Councillor Foxton. Councillor Galloway, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and it's really quite nice seeing how the meeting of the minds has taken place on this particular project. I think, as Councillor Harris has alluded to, and that really does make it a win-win. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff. This too is a rather complicated issue, not as simple as some people think. And staff put their minds to it and looked at what other communities have been doing in regards to community benefits, and we've looked at best practice, and I think staff have done a great job in giving us a couple of pilots that we can get our feet wet in, and the cash allowances are clearly part of the solution to encourage contractors to engage in this particular process. So really looking forward to how these 2 pilots work out and do the analysis and see if this can make a difference in employing people who are generally disadvantaged in terms of some of their employment opportunities, and actually at the same time adding more people to the trades that are in dire need of more people. So it's kind of a win-win on both accounts.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. I just want to point out for those listening through live streaming or YouTube that the 2 projects are 416 Kings Court Drive, Waterloo, and 82 Wilson Avenue, Kitchener. And Mr. Dyer, I see you've lit up your square. Did you want to make some comment on this before we vote?
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, thank you so much. And just to extend my thanks to Councillors Harrison and Galloway for your kind remarks in terms of the staff effort here. And I would just like to extend mine even further to a couple of members of the team who are on the call today, Martha Wolf and Christine Stahl from our Community Services Department played key roles in working through the various options and coming up with a solution that was agreeable to the committee, and we're hopeful to council as well. So thanks very much to them.
Thank you, and I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't also acknowledge that there was involvement from Conestoga College as well as industry, so there was some community input, and I think it's a very good result. And to echo Councillor Harris's comments too, it's a pilot, and we learn from pilots. So colleagues, it's been moved and seconded, and I think some of you already attempted to vote, so now if you could use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. We now will vote on the summary of Planning and Works Committee. This is items 11.1 through 11, or 1 through 11, I guess is 11.2. Items 1 through 11. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Galloway. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. We'll now vote to approve the summary from the Committee Services Committee. This is items, it's 11.23, and it's items 1 through 5. If I could have a mover, Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. I'm waiting for Councillor Galloway. I know he wants to vote. There, carried. We'll now vote to approve the summary from the Library Committee. There are 2 items on this: approve the financial results as well as the allocation of the 2021 library operating surplus. This is moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor or opposed, please use your icons. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now vote to approve the summary from the closed Planning Committee meeting. And there are 2 items on this. This is from the April 12th, 2022 meeting. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Jowett, seconded by Councillor Foxton. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. Thank you, colleagues. We now need a motion to vote to approve the summary of the closed Finance and Administration and Finance Committee. I moved by Councillor Jowett, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. We now need a vote to approve the summary of the closed Community Services Committee. That is moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. We now need a vote to approve the summary of the Audit Committee. Moved by Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Shantz seconding it. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. Next agenda item is the Chief Administrative Officer Plan and Financial Update. And I believe I'm calling on Craig Dyer and Connie McDonald to introduce this report. Who's going to go first? Connie, are you first? Welcome.
I am. Thank you, and through the chair, I'm very pleased to join my colleague, Mr. Dyer, today in presenting our first quarter plan and financial update. While we're still early in the year, good progress has already been made on achieving the goals that Council set for the region in our annual business plan this year. These have included the launch and approval of the Early Years and Childcare Service System Plan, the launch of Seniors Dental Care Program for low-income seniors in partnership with the Kitchener Downtown and Langs Community Health Centres, the launch of the region's first Clean Economy Cluster Map, the opening of the new domestic baggage facility at the region of Waterloo Airport, the extension of the COVID Safe Ambassador Program to support local businesses, the move-in of residents at the new Affordable Housing Initiative on Bechtel Street in Cambridge, and the announcement of the region's $570,000 investment annually to support the purchase of the House of Friendship's new Weber Street location. This is simply a sampling of all the great initiatives that have moved forward so far this year, and there are many more in the report. You will notice that all of these initiatives involve community collaboration and partnership. Nothing the region does is in isolation, and this progress is in thanks to our partners, working closely with council and regional staff to help support our community. As we look at our progress and identify any areas of risk for our next quarter, I also want to acknowledge the significant impact that the Omicron wave of the pandemic had on the community, our partners, and of course our staff during the first quarter. Many staff were personally and professionally impacted. We had staff redeployed from across the organization to support essential frontline services, including in shelters and long-term care. And we're currently working with staff to assess the impact of this on our plan and progress and working on any needed mitigation strategies going forward. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Dyer for an update on the financials.
Thank you, Connie, and through you, Madam Chair. Just to try to summarize what's been a fairly eventful time from a financial perspective since the budget was approved back in December, I think there are two main stories to say to Council tonight. The first is the story of funding for homelessness programs, and you'll recall when the budget was approved that staff had recommended that we make assumptions that we were going to receive additional homelessness funding from the federal and provincial governments in the amount of approximately $7 million. That was a fairly big risk that we took, but that council supported, and it turned out to be the right decision because the federal and provincial governments have come through significantly over the last month or two with additional Reaching Home initiative funding and a fifth phase of the Social Services Relief Fund and the announcement of a consolidation of homelessness programs into the homelessness prevention program, which also provided some additional funding. So that $7 million gap in our budget has largely been filled. So that is very encouraging for us for this year. Still a number of concerns we need to get through for 2023, but in terms of 2022 operations, these are extremely helpful announcements that we're very grateful for. And then the other big story, no surprise at all, will be the inflation story, particularly with respect to fuel price escalation. And as we've noted in the report, that with fuel prices at the level they are and have been over the first quarter of this year, we're potentially looking at a $6 to $7 million fuel price variance. So we'll be monitoring this closely. You can expect in our next report at the end of the second quarter, you can expect to see a full projection to the end of the year. And to the extent that any recommendations are required, we'll provide them then. But in the meantime, we'll monitor these and other developments closely and report back to council as needed. I hope that's helpful and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. This is all really important information. Most of it good, some of it not. And inflation is just a fact of life. Are there any questions or comments from council? Thank you very much for reporting and highlighting all of this very important work. Connie and Craig, very much appreciated. Councillor Erb, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get my my button on fast. So, of the $7 million that we've been that's been announced to date, nothing is included, or we haven't received any indication of the Rapid 3 housing yet. Is that correct?
No, we haven't received any indication of the Rapid 3 housing yet.
Okay.
We're still working on that. 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 We're still working on
that could be over and above that initiative of the federal government?
So we have three, Madam Chair. We have funding announced through the Reaching Home initiative. There's also the Rapid Housing Initiative, which is a separate program and that we've used predominantly to fund capital work. I'm just trying to rack my brain to remember where we're at with that. I think we're still expecting further announcements over the course of this year. I can't quite recall the details, though. We can certainly get back to you, or perhaps Mr. Petitpierre has some additional details on that.
Okay, Ryan, do you have something you'd like to add?
Sure, and through you, Madam Chair. Through the federal budget announcement, we are expecting a Rapid Housing Initiative 3, Councillor Erb. So we put those dollars to good use through the first two versions of that program. The timing, we don't know as of yet. So we expect it this year. Best guess would maybe be around the summer for the details of education or funds that we might be able to apply for. So that's the full level of details that we know at this time on rapid housing.
Councillor Erb, any further questions?
No, just a comment that if you want to see the value of the rapid housing, you need to look at the YW project on Block Line Road, where I think 42 women are moving in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and how fast that was built, and what a nice facility is, and hopefully we continue to get more funding, because we could really make a difference in a short period of time with a lovely facility.
Thank you for that. Councillor Galloway.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Craig, you indicated the exposure we have, the risk exposure we have on fuel, and it's significant. Do we have much of an exposure on interest rates rising? I know this week you reported, or one of your staff reported, on a debenture issue, and the rates are certainly inching up. But our other debentures, of course, are fixed rates. So we don't have any exposure on those. But do we have any other borrowings that we do on a month-to-month basis that are going to be subject to higher interest rates, or maybe more generally, are we at any exposure on interest rate increases?
Madam Chair, I would say that from a day-to-day kind of short-term borrowing perspective, that's not something that we do. So we don't really have any exposure in terms of any borrowing that we might be required on a short-term basis. As far as long-term borrowing goes, you're absolutely correct. To the extent that debt has already been issued, it's all at a fixed cost. The exposure is really in terms of our future debt requirements. So, we have the issue that we've just placed, for which there are bylaws for council to consider and approve this evening. Those rates are, I would describe them as still very favorable rates, relatively speaking, but certainly the highest rate seen in a number of years. And so we've seen 2 interest rate increases so far this year from the Bank of Canada. That has certainly affected the short end. The longer end of the yield curve has also come up. And so where we're going to start to see this is when we look at our future debt servicing costs over the next 3 or 4 years. We have a significant amount of debt planned in our capital program, and one of the things that we'll be looking at as we put the next iteration of the 10-year capital program together is looking for opportunities to adjust the timing and scope and cost of projects so that we can minimize that risk going forward. Certainly something we'll report back on through our long-term financial sustainability update later this year.
Okay, thanks, Craig.
Thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. Craig, you almost answered my question I was about to ask. It was really on the 10-year capital plan. I realize that's not the scope of this, but and you spoke about the impact of to Councillor Galloway's comment on borrowing. I was just wondering more about inflation, and we think about development charges or the future CBCs and how that might be captured. When we do a budget, let's say we're going to do a capital project in, say, 2027, right? You know, the fact of whether inflation is 2% or inflation is averaging 4%, there's a huge difference. And I was actually going to ask a question earlier in the capital works projects, particularly on Northfield Drive, where budget was here, but we needed to pull in this extra money to get the project done this year already. And so I'm just wondering, like, you know, as council sits down, looking at the 10-year budget, is that something that a municipality can take into account, or is that prohibited by law, or where does that, say, 2027 number, 5 years out only, come from with respect to inflation?
Yes, a very good question. Through Madam Chair, I'll attempt this answer, and I hope it makes sense. We do a 10-year capital forecast each year. We put the cost estimates together for projects. So in this case, we have a 2022 to 2031 capital program. Everything we show in that program is in 2022 dollars. And so every year, as projects get closer, we update and review and update all the projects for scope, timing, cost. And to the extent that there is inflation, then we would adjust the costs accordingly, so that when a project is then getting approved, it's okay, hopefully we're very close to what the actual cost will be. At the same time, our development charges, for example, are being indexed annually based on a construction price index. So in theory, our development charge rates are being inflated at a rate that's similar to the cost of the projects themselves. But the point is that it's an annual update where we try to take a very close look through all of our projects and adjust for timing, costs, and scope. And then in theory, development charge rates are updated as well. And then back to Councillor Galloway's point, to the extent that we're debt financing, we forecast our debt servicing costs based on our best estimate of what we think those what the cost of borrowing will be for that debt. I hope that helps.
This really helps. You know what? I think I'll retire November 14th thinking everything's in good hands. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
What I love was it was a really good question, and Craig's so skillful, I think I understood what the answer was. Well done. Colleagues, I see no more questions or comments. So before we go on to the next section, I'm going to ask us all to turn back to 11.1.12. It has to do with the Regional of Waterloo International Airport Terminal renovation and addition. And we have passed it, but Councillor Harris had a question and couldn't get his hand up fast enough to ask. So I would return to that report. So Councillor Harris, you can either ask your question or make your comment.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question. You know, it won't change the vote, of course, but I did, you know, we obviously had the pleasure of being at the airport this past week. I thank Chris Wood and Rod for the tour of the expansion there. Councillor Galloway and I and Councillor Erb toured that project. I just wanted to ask with regards to that particular tender, the airport terminal renovation and addition, I did see there was only one bidder that closed that particular project, about $12 million in value. I know that the schedule likely was an impact for likely limited bidders. I did hear other aspects of the procurement that really limited the amount of folks that picked up this package. I never like to see one bidder on a project. I'm wondering quickly if finance or procurement can either quickly answer me now or even just make a commitment to reach out to me, as I do maybe have some more detailed questions on the particulars of why you know, we only got one bidder there.
Craig, is this something you want to address at this point in time?
Through Madam Chair, I can say a couple of things. One is that there was a pre-qualified list of bidders for the work. If I recall, there was either 4 or 5. I can't quite recall the exact number, but we can certainly look that up. And as indicated, there were 2 bids. One of those bids was disqualified for not meeting one or more essential requirements of the bid. I would say that Councillor Harris, we'd be happy to arrange a chat between the 2 of us and our procurement office to run through any additional details if that's helpful.
I would need, and no rush, but maybe you want to reach out and we can go from there. So that we can, if we're doing more work, which we realize we will be potentially in the future, we can ensure that some of those aspects, and they may revolve around insurance and so forth, are addressed so we get more bids. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Craig and Connie, for that great update. I have no report. The regional clerk assures me that he has no report. So we are now at item 13, a motion for the committee of the whole to rise and council to resume. If I could have a mover, Councillor McGarry, Councillor Harris, please use your icons to vote yes or no that we committee of the whole rise and council resume. That is carried. I now would entertain a motion to adopt the proceedings of the committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. And you're voting that the council adopt the proceedings of the committee of the whole. That is carried. We have no motions, no notices of motions. Is there any unfinished business? Seeing none, there is under other business 18.1, and it's a closed motion for Indigenous land acknowledgement education session. And colleagues, if I could have, Councillor Shantz, do you have a question or a comment, or are you?
Just a quick one. Would this be different from the one that we did at the township, or is it an identical session? Does anyone know?
I will look to staff. Connie, is that something you could answer?
Thank you. And through the chair, Councillor Shantz, I do believe it's the same session that was organized at the township, but it's also being offered for all of council.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll gauge my attendance accordingly. Thanks.
So if I could have a mover, moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Shantz, and we're voting on a closed meeting of council to be held on Friday, May 6th, 2022 at 1 p.m. electronically in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 for the purpose of considering the subject and its education related to Indigenous land acknowledgement. So it's been moved and seconded. If you would use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. Do we have any questions? Actually, we have many questions, but none to be entertained at this juncture. Enactment of the bylaws, first and second readings. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Harris. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. And you're voting on 6 bylaws. That is carried. Colleagues, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Harris, second and thirded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. Great meeting. Everybody have a safe and enjoyable evening. Take care.
Safe drive home.